Hey guys, welcome back to the Betar Project. I'm your host, Nick Betar. Today we are joined by Sam Webb. Webby, thank you for jumping on, brother.
Mate, Nick, thanks so much for having me on the Betar Project, mate. I'm looking forward to being here with you and having a good chat today about some good tools and strategies around mental health.
Awesome, man. I love to start my podcast with gratefuls. So what are you grateful for today?
Mate, you know what? I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my health in this time, simply because there are a lot of people who are struggling. I'm in a place, for those people who don't know, I live in LA, and here is just a lot of homeless, a lot of people that you see just struggling, man, just with their general health. And I think it's something that a lot of us take for granted. And I just want to say that I'm grateful for it. And I'm always grateful for it because I'm just lucky to be here, but lucky to have the health that I have, because there's a lot of people that don't have the health that I have.
Exactly. And especially in times like this, that's why I'm grateful to have you on to talk about mental health and health in general. So thank you for jumping on.
Yeah, likewise, mate. Thank you.
So for people who don't know you, you want to kind of give a quick backstory of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure, man. Sure. So my name is Sam Webb. A little bit about me. So my background is I studied a finance and accounting degree, did a business degree back in 2009 to 2012 on the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia, at Bond University. Lived in America for about a year, worked in a finance wealth management firm, moved back to Australia. My life sort of spiraled out of control. This was 2013. I had my own mental health challenges, spiraled, and it was a really tough year. 2013, I transitioned from the finance world into radio and TV. I worked for Oz Stereo, where I was selling radio, space time, and TV ads and whatnot, and then got my break doing acting. And at that stage, I was cast in a theatre production on the Gold Coast, which went for about 7 to 9 weeks. It was amazing. It was something that I've wanted to do my whole life, but I really never really gave it the time of day to do it. And I was more into sports and rugby and touch and all that stuff growing up. And I loved it, man. Very much addicted to it. Very therapeutic. And during that time of performing on my first ever theatre play, I was at that time, I was dealing with my own mental illnesses, but simultaneously I reconnected with a very, very good friend who I've known over the years. His name was Dwayne Lally. And we caught up a lot during the year. And obviously when I was away in America the year prior, we used to keep in touch and grew up together, man, played rugby league, touch. But Dwayne think of a young knockabout bloke, life of the party, charismatic, loved to have a good time. So did I. And Dwayne and I used to always say, we're going to the top, man. We're going to the top. It's going to be a great life. We're going to live our best life. And no matter what happens, challenges, setbacks, nothing was going to stop us. That was just the thing we used to say to each other. And I remember Dwayne, and sorry if this story sort of seems out of place, but this is 2013. So I'm still in the same year that I booked the theatre play. And Dwayne, I caught up with Dwayne one weekend. It was September 14th. Of 2013. It's a night and a day I'll never forget. And Dwayne and I were meant to catch up and go to a party. And we did go to his house party, a little house gathering, I probably should say. And Dwayne opened up to me, told me a little bit about his backstory with mental illness, mental health, and all that sort of stuff. And he basically told me he tried to take his life twice before, and I didn't see it coming. And I was so caught off guard as a 24-year-old dude, man. And I was looking at my good friend opposite me and trying to reassure him that everything was going to be all right. I thought I said what I could have said. I thought I listened as best as I could have listened. And Dwayne being Dwayne, man, he's a life of the party, hates to show a lot of vulnerability. I remember him looking at me and saying, "Don't worry, Webb, I'm fine." And I knew that Dwayne had suffered with mental illness for quite some time, but I wasn't really sure how serious it was for him and the journey that he was on. And it was mental illness in terms of bipolar disorder and depression for a number of years. And I remember that last conversation that we had that night at his house, at the house gathering that he got me around for on that date. And he told me he was fine. And that was the last time I saw Dwayne. He actually left the party that night and he went missing, and he had it wasn't good, man. And I searched halfway around the Gold Coast for him that night looking for him, and I couldn't find him. And you know, it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It was the next day, September 15 of 2013. I got confirmation that Dwayne had taken his own life, and that's where Livin started. And why I'm explaining this is because you asked what I do and a little bit about me. And that's it. Just, I needed to give you a bit of backstory as to what I do with Livin. So that's where Livin, the charity, started in Dwayne's honor. And I'm very happy to talk more in depth about that, obviously, in that moment, that night. But that was September 15 of 2013. And man, I'll never forget that day and the aftermath, not only for me, man, but the family. Dwayne's family is very close with them, and the impact that that life, or Dwayne's life, I should say, had on so many people from so many walks of life. It was devastating. It still is. But Dwayne's one story out of thousands of people that take their life every year in Australia. And so what we did is start Livin in Dwayne's honor, Casey and I, so that we could break the stigma around mental health and suicide prevention. So now I'll cut a long story short, and here I am in Los Angeles, California, still very much involved in Livin, which is headquartered in the Gold Coast of Australia. And yeah, we're very grateful for all the support and help that we've got over the years. And yeah, we're speaking to schools and workplaces all around Australia, selling apparel so that we can break down the burdens around not only masculinity in general, but also just the taboo around mental illness and suicide prevention, and educate people that it ain't weak to speak. And apart from that, mate, I'm pursuing my acting career out here in West Hollywood of Australia, of Los Angeles. And mate, I love it. It's a great combination.
I love that, man. Now, going back to Dwayne, that night when he opened up to you, and then the next day, obviously, sadly took his life. How did that really affect you? And did you feel some sort of guilt or put blame on yourself that you could have done more?
Yeah, I mean, look, the night that Dwayne had opened up to me and told me how he was feeling, it was like a moment of both of us spoke to each other about our truths that not many people really knew of. I shared my struggles, my suicidal ideations in the past, my family that has been affected by mental illness and suicide over the years prior to this. We've lost mutual friends, Dwayne and I, to suicide as well prior to that night. And mate, to be brutally honest, I thought I listened and said everything I possibly could have, but that was the problem. You know, like as a male, we often try and talk and problem solve all the time. And we often try to think, how can we solve this right now? We don't have to wait. And I think that was the problem. I did listen. I did probably beat myself up, and it's something that I learned to live with, is probably listening more. And I definitely listened. I listened as best as I possibly could have. And I said everything I possibly could have said. But again, it probably wasn't about what I said. A lot of the time when people are struggling, or, you know, they might be telling you how they feel, they don't really want any answers. They just want you to listen there and just sit in silence with them while they struggle, and sit next to them and feel them as best as you possibly can. Feel what they're going through, if that makes sense. And yeah, in the aftermath of Dwayne's passing, of course, mate, it was really what, you know, that whole time between Dwayne's passing and starting Livin and getting Livin off the ground was a big ass project. It wasn't like a thing that happened overnight. There was a lot of setbacks. There was a lot of obstacles we ran into, both Casey and I, in terms of setting it up, finding finances, getting it off the ground. But what really drove me was that part of that, I probably, you know, did take responsibility for Dwayne's death. And I know I shouldn't have. And it's not my responsibility at all. And I've had to surrender to that over the years. I really have had to give that peace and accept that that wasn't my fault. I did what I could have done. But mate, in the moment after that happened, in the months after it, the years after it, starting Livin, everything I was doing was to try and right back that wrong. You know, what had I done? Like, what had happened under my watch? That was basically where my motivations were coming from. I just wanted to stay busy. I wanted to try and repay what had just happened. You know, it was left a hole in Dwayne's family's life forever, you know, and I just wanted to do what I could to make a difference. And it wasn't going to bring Dwayne back, but maybe we could save other people's lives along the way.
Exactly. And knowing what you know now, what would you do different in handling that situation? Just listen more?
Yeah, I think, mate, probably a combination, you know. I think I probably wouldn't have been in that situation to start with. I don't think we would have gotten to that situation in the night at that event, at that house, at that exact time. I don't think it would have got there had I have known the struggles Dwayne was really, you know, challenged with. But if I was in that situation again, absolutely listen, but I probably wouldn't have left Dwayne's sight, because I think in hindsight, while he was telling me that he's tried to do it before and he reassured me that he was never going to do it again and he promised life was great and his future looked bright and promising. I mean, yeah, I still, there was red flags and I should have known. I wish I not should have, because that's not the right word, but yeah, if I'd known what I know now, I'd like to think Dwayne would probably still be here.
Mm. And the mantra, I'm fine, life's good, everything's going sweet. I don't know what's better to say, that or nothing at all. Really?
Yeah, I think most of us are on autopilot though, so we always automatically just say I'm fine, it's sweet, don't worry about me, worry about yourself. It's like we don't want you to feel a burden, and I know Dwayne was like that. He didn't want to burden you with something that he was struggling with, and I think that ties back to our mantra, it ain't weak to speak. Like sometimes we're not mind readers, so if someone is really struggling and I can't see it as a friend, I'm not a mind reader, Nick. I can't see what you might be struggling with, because you might be acing that mask really well and you might be hiding it to perfection. So how am I meant to pick that up? So sometimes we have to know that it ain't weak to speak and take full responsibility for the way that we feel. Because in order for us to get better and to move forward in life, we have to speak up. I believe that we have to take responsibility, and it's also on the flip side, it ain't weak to listen. It ain't weak to support someone that's struggling. Don't run away. If they're there and they open up to you, just listen. You're not meant to have the answers to everything. Sometimes, like you mentioned as well, people just want to be they just want to be heard.
Exactly. And I kind of revert that back to being with like females, like they just want to talk to you. They don't want
Mm.
solutions. And I feel like a lot of the times us males just want to come up with solutions every time. But no, you just got to sit there and listen.
Yeah, that's it, man. Just sit there and listen. That's it. The art of listening.
Exactly. But when it comes to mental health, it's also hard because I found, and you will know a lot of the times, it's always the people that are the life of the party, the real happy ones that seems like life is going so good for them, but in the inside, they're really hurting. And sometimes it can be hard to pick up on those red flags or cues as well. Like, so that's why I'm a big believer, continue like reaching out to those people as well and asking if they're okay and if they need anything.
Yeah, I agree too, man. I mean, that's the old saying of, it's the life of the parties that they're the people that have probably got the most of the red flags, and oftentimes it is, but it's not all the time. And I think what we must understand is that there's a reason why people mask their emotions, and it could be a lack of understanding. They might not want people to know. They might be dealing with it their own way. They might not understand what to say. They might not understand um, any of it. They might not even understand what they're going through. They might think it's something else. So they're just trying to, I guess, convince themselves that they're actually doing better than they really are. And a lot of people who might even be listening to this podcast might be feeling the same way. And I think at the end of the day, what's most like the safest thing to possibly do is probably just, if you're in doubt, just reach out. I know it sounds easy, and I make it sound easy, and it's not easy. And I'll be the first to admit that. I've been on my own mental health journey over the years, and it's not easy. But I can tell you that getting the support and reaching out and asking for help is the best support that you'll ever get. And it does take time, but with time, you'll get back on track and you'll start living again.
Exactly. Now, do you know what the suicide rates in Australia, like where do we rank in the world?
Mate, I couldn't tell you off as of today, mate, with the stats, because they're forever changing, and I'm not a statistician, so to speak, or a mental health expert by any means. But Australia is high. I mean, we're losing 8 to 9 people every day in Australia to suicide, which is very high based on our population. More men than women, obviously. I think it's 6 out of every 8 is male, and that's again changing all the time. But I mean, um, again, population wise, I think Australia is definitely up there. America's hugely up there. UK, there's a lot of New Zealand. There's so many countries, man. Suicide is one of the leading cause of deaths in a lot of first world countries, Western societies like the US, Australia, UK, New Zealand, these countries. So, mate, it's devastating, and I don't know what the impact of COVID is going to be like, but I think the post-pandemic is going to be not going to be surprising when we see statistics come through either,
Yeah, and like coming back to Australia, and I guess our Indigenous population, like I believe they're one of the highest suicide rates in Australia. And on
Absolutely,
that,
they are.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I did a podcast. Have you heard of Joe Williams before?
Yeah,
Or
mate. Joey's a friend of mine.
yeah, I had him on the podcast and
Oh, nice.
we were speaking about it. And he mentioned out of 2,500 dialects of indigenous language, there was no word that meant suicide, which means it didn't happen like before England came out to Australia.
Mm.
So why do you think there is suicide now in, I guess, Western civilization?
Mate, I don't, again, I won't, I might not have the scientific evidence here because I'm certainly not a mental health expert. I do want to make that clear to anyone that is listening. I'm basing this off my own research and my own understanding in the mental health landscape. But I think there are a combination of a lot of things. First things first, man. I mean, why is suicide rates the way they are these days? It could be a combination of a lot of things. Hereditary, your biological togetherness or the way that you're created and the family that you come from, I think has got a big part to play with it. And those predispositions to mental illness that could possibly lead down down suicide routes. I think drugs and alcohol. I think the pressures of society with the work-life balance. I think the fast-paced life that we live in now, technology is so fast, people can't keep up with it. There's no one way that contributes just to suicide by any means. But there is a lot of combinations that influence the total number of people dying by suicide, no doubt.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all those like traumas and stuff. But
Yeah.
a lot of it, I think, is the pressures and expectations that society puts us on, and the fast pace. Like, we're not being in the present. We're always focusing on the past or trying to focus on the future, which brings up either depression, anxiety, and it really stuffs us up and can lead us down a dark path.
Exactly. And that's why this space is very complex, because people like, so what, like they ask, you get the question, so why, and what is it? Like, what's the one thing that's caught? Like, there is no one thing. And if it was that easy to solve, don't you think we would be solving it by now? That's the thing. Like, there's so many things at play here. Predisposition to mental illness is huge. Your upbringing, abuse, like you mentioned, past traumas. There are so many things that could come into play. Someone might take their life because of a combination of things, and then the final tipping point might have been a bad breakup with a partner, or something financially might have went wrong. But that doesn't mean that caused it. That just could be a contributing factor towards it. But there are a lot of things that the media and outlets and people don't quite understand that go towards contributing to that choice that individual has made. And sometimes it's definitely a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Yeah, it's just the build up, and then eventually it explodes.
Mate, it happens far too often.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned your own mental health struggles. You want to kind of touch on that?
Sure, man. So in 2009, when I was studying at college, my business degree, man, I was, very, I guess, manic in a way, where I was highly aroused, highly strung. And I probably still am to these days, but I've learned to manage it a lot better. And I wasn't quite sure what was happening. Life was sort of like I was really up and down and round and round. It just didn't feel right. But I just thought at that stage, I was pretty young. I was early 20s. And I just thought, well, maybe these moods and the way I am is just the way I am. And there's nothing that this is. It's just the way Sam Webb is. And that's just his brain makeup and it's life. And I was just accepting it. But it got to a point where it was debilitating, man. It was starting to take over my life. It was changing the way I was behaving and operating. And if it wasn't for, my family members to recognize some of the things that weren't right, which is some of those things like just changing behavior, maybe excessive drinking or not drinking. And then when I was, it was like full on, like nonstop, like binge drinking. Just little things were red flags that I would probably have just said as an excuse, but it took family to say, maybe this is something underlying. Why don't you go and get it checked out and maybe speak to a mental health professional, because it is something that runs in our family. So chances are that it certainly could be linked to that, or there might be something underlying that you'll be able to have answers for this black dog that you're experiencing that you don't really know what it is, but you're happy to live with it, which I could have. I'm not saying I couldn't have, but yeah, I decided to get the help and support that I need. And I'm telling you right now, that first time I went and got the support that I needed, I was very nervous. I didn't really know what to say. Like, you're in a very quick GP visit where GP visits can be very fast and it's almost like rushed in their own right. So it's like, what do you explain? Like, do they ask the questions? Do I have to preempt them? Like, what is it? And luckily for my family and the support that I had, that there'd already been a little bit of experience in this stuff. So going to a GP, I'd already preempted them. Can I fill out a mental health questionnaire or a mental health plan, and just see if this is something that I'm struggling with? Let them know some of my warning signs, like overly cleaning, overly anxious, highly strung, changing my appetite, changing my mood. All these things were red flags, right? That they're warning signs. And yeah, mate, it led on to one thing, and saw a psychologist and ended up getting diagnosed with anxiety and depression for the first time. And I was like, okay, so what is this? And then I started to unpack that. And at like my mom and my mum's side of her family, they've struggled with mental illnesses and suicide their whole life. We've had family members die by suicide, and I still wasn't really educated on it. And I just got told that I'd been diagnosed with anxiety and depression by a clinical psychologist. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And for me, I wasn't like, okay, I know what this is, I'm going to tell everyone. I wasn't like out there with a foghorn going, guys, this is what I've got. Like, I kept it pretty close. It was just in my family and some close friends that might have known. And it was just something that I learned to live with. And what worked really well for me was a combination at the time of medication, antidepressants, and cognitive behavior therapy, which really helped me rewire my anxious thoughts in my brain and change the way that I think about things. Specifically, I had a really bad time jumping into lifts at one stage of my life, like an elevator, because I was worried I was going to get stuck in there. And in the moment when I wasn't really wired correctly, and my mind was completely jumping to irrational thoughts, I would think, oh, I don't want to get stuck in there. I would have no water. What happens if I get stuck? No one finds me. I might die, right? That's a very irrational thought. But in the moment, and when my brain chemicals were sort of all over the shop and I was highly aroused and I couldn't focus or concentrate, which is all part of a mental health challenge, of course I'm going to go down that route and that rabbit hole and think of those dark options that probably aren't real. And then cognitive behavior therapy taught me to rewire that thought. So what's the thought? The trigger is jumping in a lift. Okay, how does that make you feel? It makes me feel anxious. I get very bad emotionally anxiety, sweaty hands, fast heart rate, numb fingertips, whatever it is. And what's the facts that are backing that up? And I was like, well, there's no real facts backing the fact up that people have been left in a lift and died before. So where does that come from? So I had to rewire that and gave myself the real rationale facts is no one's ever died from being stuck in a lift that I've known of. I've known people that have been stuck in lifts and they've been found and they're fine. So then I had to go through that wire and rewire my thinking. And you do that repetitively over and over again via thought records. And then that was just one of the challenges that I had. And then I finally changed the way I thought about jumping in the lift. And then I was fine. And then I challenged myself. I'm going to jump in a lift, not going to be a problem. And I'm going to have no anxiety and I'm going to be sweet. And then got to the stage where it was completely fine. But then the thing was, with my mental health journey, and especially when I got diagnosed with anxiety, it was mainly for anxiety, but you take antidepressants for anxiety. And I was on a drug called Zoloft for about 5 years. And it, for me, and again, I'm not a mental health professional. Everyone has very, very different views and expectations. I'm a big believer that a combination of anything to get your mental health carbonated and to a level where you can make, wired changes in your life is important. I'm no stigma around medication. I think medication works. Absolutely. I'm on similar stuff today. I'm the first person to admit that. But I think it's important to say that this is in combination to other things that I do, natural remedies, walking, exercise, self-help books, meditation, enjoying my life, But the thing was, at that time, at a young age, studying at university, I was quite overwhelmed. And when I was taking Zoloft for so many years, I I basically, for me, I sort of felt like a zombie. I wasn't too high, so I never got super, super excited, but I never was ever low and like really depressed or sad. But I was just sitting, I was cruising in the middle. And it was really hard for me to have any emotions, which was kind of tough for me because I like to think I'm a pretty emotional dude to a certain degree, right? And that led to part of the zombie state that I felt. That's the best way to explain how I felt. Not that everyone's going to feel it. So I want to make that clear. It's how I felt, how my brain reacted to it after a while. You know, that came with excessive drinking and drug use, and not excessive drug use, but trialing drugs for the very first time in my life. Because what this done for me was I was over these phobias that I was struggling with. I was not feeling amazingly high, but I wasn't feeling low. I was in the middle. So I needed something to sort of bump me up. So what I was doing was drinking a lot. And that drinking led me to take risks, things in my life that I wouldn't normally do. And that's when it got sort of dangerous for me. So after a while, I sort of went back to a psychologist, told them what I was doing. I was kind of had an erratic behavior, did things that I wouldn't normally do, making wrong choices. Wasn't blaming just the medication. It was a number of things in my life, but basically ended up weaning myself off medication fully for the next, what was that? 2013. I was off medication for the next 10 years. No, not the next 10 years. That was 2013. My maths is cooked. Like the next 7 years, 7.5 years. And here I am today, man, back in LA, living a great life, very grateful with the life that I live, you know, but I still see a mental health professional every single week. And, at this point in my life, I'm back on medication to help me with my journey because there's been some struggles over the past couple of years. But again, it's never been to a point where it's life or death in those times, thankfully. But and that probably is down to my own mental health journey and what I know about mental health and the support that I've got in my life. But yeah, it's just managing it, man. It really is.
Yeah, exactly. And
I hope that makes sense.
yeah, it does. And with anxiety, like I can resonate with a lot of the struggles because I have anxiety myself. And I only recently I kind of learnt about it. I thought it was just normal growing up, like what I went through. And then recently I put a poll up on my Instagram, like who struggles with anxiety. And I didn't realize how common it is.
Very.
It's crazy. Like, and for me, like as I said, I go through a lot of the same struggles as you, and I build up a lot of fear, and I get really overstimulated and fatigued.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's like a defense mechanism, I believe, to kind of stay in your comfort zone and not kind of go out. Do you have any times where you've built up so much fear in yourself, and you've gone and done what you've had to do, and after you've realized, why the hell did I create so much fear besides the elevator?
Yeah, mate. And the elevator was just one of the stories out of probably quite a few. And that didn't honestly really last too long in my life, but I just wanted to explain how you can use CBT therapy for thoughts that generally aren't helpful. So hopefully I got the point across with that. But mate, absolutely. There have been times in my life where fear has certainly played a big part in my life. But I'm like, similar to what you mentioned, I've always hit fear head on in a way that it helps me get past my struggles. It's really allows you to get outside of your comfort zone. That's why I've always liked, since a young age, trying new things, you know, learning, being a sponge, putting myself out there. And when I'm nervous or I don't want to do something, I make myself do it because I know that after it, I'll have such a great feeling and it's like a euphoric high. And I'm like, I'm so glad I did that. Like, what was I worrying all that time about? I was like stressing about something that I didn't even need to stress about, which I think everyone can relate to who's listening to this podcast. We all overthink or stress about something that hasn't even started or been done yet. And we often do it. And we're like, well, what the hell did we stress about? That was just a waste of energy. And that's the stuff that's really detrimental to people's health, man. Anxiety is the most common mental health condition in Australia, if not the world. And I think everyone has some form of anxiety at some level, whether it's diagnosable or not, very different story. But we all experience natural anxiety from time to time, you know what I mean, as well. And I think that's important to mention. And there's nothing wrong with it, whether it's on a diagnosable end or whether it's just your normal everyday nervousness. getting up to do a presentation at work or going for a job interview or what I'm going to say to this girl that I like or whatever it is, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A little bit of anxiety is good for you, but it's when it starts changing the way that you think and behave and all that sort of stuff is when you got to start reining it in. And again, what I said, if you're in doubt, just reach out and ask for help.
Exactly. Like for me growing up, I let anxiety kind of not let me take opportunities. I let that fear like get the best of me
Hold you
kind of
back.
thing.
Trying
And
to let you
then,
hold you back.
yeah. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to get anywhere in life if I let this control me. So that's why I do the podcast. And still now, like I get nervous and get sick and fatigued. If I talk to some guests, like this morning, I was a bit sick because I was having you on, like you're a big guest for me. And I get really anxious and overthink. And I was like, oh, fuck, I hope I don't stuff this up. But after this, like, I'll feel heaps sweet. I was like,
Mate, you're doing a great job, man. Nothing to be worried about. Yeah. And I know the feeling, man. It's okay to feel like that. But yeah, like you mentioned, straight after it, you'll feel on top of the world and you'll crush this and you'll probably have this same feeling going into your next guest. And that's just life. And that's just life, mate. No one's life's perfect. I've not met one person in my life ever that their life is absolutely pain-free or issue-free. So don't ever get anyone listening, don't ever get fooled by people's perceptions on life, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or whether you see them in the street or at a party or whatever it is. That no one's life is pain-free and life is about to be, it's always up and down for everyone. That's what it's about.
Exactly. And the only way to get better is to kind of face it head on and keep going. Like when I first started this, I could barely string a sentence together and have a proper conversation. And now I'm here today talking to you. Like
yeah, mate, you're doing a great job.
The amount of growth that I've, grown in the last 12 months or so, it's been massive. And that's just by putting in the repetitions every day.
Yeah. And just, practicing and putting yourself out there. And I think that's the same with anything. Like I always challenge people, man, if you're struggling with something, figure out a way to get around that struggle, because oftentimes when you do, you're going to feel a lot better about yourself. It will help you build self-esteem, added confidence. And then the next time you get put in a situation like that, you're going to be a little bit more familiar with it, and that's important. But again, life is a journey. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Mental health is manageable with the right help and support. That is, sometimes we can't do things on our own and we have to reach out for help. And that's just the choice that certain people make and some people don't make. And I'm the one that in my life, I'm making those choices because I know that it's better off.
Exactly. And life's a roller coaster. You can have the highs and the lows. You just got to go through it.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly.
Now with Livin, have you set it up in USA yet, or are you still in the process?
Yeah, so the Livin was going to get set up. Well, it was set up in the US, but we were going to really invest time and energy and stuff into it over here while I was here. But because of the pandemic and a few changes and whatnot happened in Australia, we wanted to divert all of our energy, resources, and time back into Australia just to set it up, get it really, really nice and humming along, so to speak, so that when the time comes and if in America is a viable option for us in the near future or future, we'll definitely look at that, because mental health doesn't discriminate and it breaks boundaries, borders, no matter what country you're in. So there's a need for something like Livin or anything in mental health all around the world, I believe.
Exactly. And where are you looking to take Livin? Like, what's the big goal that you have for it?
The big goal is really to make Livin, the brand Livin, to be synonymous with the new way of mental health, the new thinking of mental health, which is like, yeah, we talk about it. We speak up about our vulnerabilities. We reach out to a friend who might be struggling, and it's all right. It's all right to make mistakes. It's all right to stuff up. It's all right to be scared. But at the end of the day, we're part of a community. We've recreated, in my mind, what I want Livin to be is a recreation. Or you look at like the traditional concept of male masculinity, right? That's got to change, because that outdated model of masculinity is costing people their lives, especially obviously young men. And I'd like to think that Livin's a charity for everyone. We don't dictate in terms of male, female, people that don't specify with genders or anything like that. I mean, at the end of the day, mental health doesn't discriminate who you are and where you're from. And I just want Livin to be a brand-led movement in the 21st century. When people think about mental health, it's cool. They think about it as being acceptable. We can have this conversation at a dinner table now. It's not that conversation that we can only have in that doctor's office where no one knows where you are and you can't talk about it. That's the old traditional way, man. That's got to change.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
mentioned masculinity. What do you think it should look like now? Is it, as you said, like, opening up and being comfortable talking about our feelings and emotions?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think masculinity should be very much opened and encouraged. There should be a lot of encouragement from friends and family, not to always put people down for having shortfalls or struggles in their life, or not being scared or worried about speaking up about challenges that exist. Like being real and honest, I think, is where it all comes to. But in order to be real and honest, you got to have a safe space. And in order to have a safe space, you either got to create it yourself or someone else has to create it. And that's why I love challenging. And I did a TEDx talk a couple of years ago in New York City. And I challenge, like I said in that talk, I challenge everyone to be the safest person possible, because you'll give your vulnerability will empower someone else to be vulnerable. And I think we need to live in a place like that. Like we openly talk about bagging people, or openly talk about mucking around, making jokes and whatnot. And we openly talk about going to the gym and struggling on a weight or whatnot. But why can't we talk about openly struggling with our mental health? Sometimes it's shit. Sometimes my mental health sucks, but that's all right, because we're all on that spectrum and we go up and down it often and very quickly sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as we start to wrap up this podcast, got a last few questions for you. Why do you get up out of bed every day and want to help people?
I just want to stop people from going through the same stuff that Dwayne probably went through, and Dwayne's family, and what I've been through. I just want to stop that from happening. I want to empower more people to start living their life and taking ownership of it. That's what gets me up every day, so that we can save more lives and get more people living.
And what does having a better life mean to you?
I mean, having a better life to me probably means just a better life, mate. That's a really good question. Actually, I haven't been asked that one. Having a better life to me, man, probably looks like just abundance of health and happiness. And how does that look for me is doing what I'm doing. I love what I do. I don't think this is work for me. I must have been set out to do this in my younger life, my other life, same with acting. I love what I do, man. I'm so blessed. I'm so lucky. I wouldn't wish another life, honestly, seriously. Like, yeah, I'm grateful. I'm very grateful, and I complain sometimes, but I often bring back to reality myself. And I thank why I'm here. And I'll never forget where it all started,
That's awesome. And you never work a day in the life if you're doing something you're passionate about.
Nah, that's it, mate. And it's something that people strive for. And yeah, and I can't believe off something so horrific that I'd take it all back to not have this here, obviously. But to be able to go through what had happened to get to this place in my life it's kind of weird. I don't understand it.
Yeah,
I still don't
sometimes
understand it.
things just happen for a reason and
Yeah,
lead you
they
down
do.
a certain path.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
How do you define success?
I define success through my relationships that I have with people, my relationship that I have with myself, and my health, which is relationship with self is health and all that sort of great stuff. Relationships with other people, and that's probably it. And the mark that I can leave on this world when I'm long gone is probably how I define success. And what influence have I had on society, or what impact have I had on someone's life while I've been here?
Awesome. Well, this last question, your answer will probably be similar, but when your time's up and done on this earth, what would you like to be remembered for?
Mate, I'd love to be remembered for being a good person, for doing things for the right reasons, and staying true to my word and staying consistent, and keeping high integrity and all that sort of stuff. Definitely. I want it. Yeah. Oh, mate, that and what I've probably already said.
Awesome. Well, Webby, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today, man. I really appreciate it.
Mate, I appreciate it, mate. I really do. I thank you, and keep up the great work. Appreciate your time. And mate, yeah, you're doing a great job on this. So keep spreading the good word and keep doing what you're doing, mate, because it's no doubt reaching people. And if you just reach one person and it makes an impact in their life, man, you've done a great job. So don't put too much pressure on yourself, bro, and just keep up the great work.
Grateful, brother. And for all the listeners, where can they best find you on social media?
They can find Livin at Livin Livin.org, Livin.org. So that's at Livin.org anywhere on social media, or they could find myself at Sam Webb with 2 B's.
Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you guys got some value out of this episode. If you did, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Cheers.